resolutions so that the larger membership of the UN would be able to engage with the pen holders in order to add their views, especially since this is the 6th resolution on the issue. Malaysia reiterates our commitment to the peaceful settlement of disputes guided by the principles enshrined in the UN Charter and under international law in the interest of maintaining regional and international peace and security. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Malaysia. Now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will be brief. Before we vote on the main resolution, allow me to address the amendments proposed by Belarus. They have been put forward by a state that has facilitated Russia's invasion, that provided the staging ground for the early attempt to topple Kyiv. And that is among a small number of states that have consistently voted against upholding Ukraine's rights under the UN Charter. The amendments attempt to create a false equivalence between Russia, which this General Assembly and the Secretary General have made clear is engaged in a full-scale invasion, and Ukraine, which is exercising its right of self-defense against that aggression. Put simply, these amendments are an attempt to undermine the Charter. They're not aimed at peace, but at defending the aggressor. They are not proposed in good faith. So we urge member states to vote against these amendments so we can move to vote in favour of the resolution that genuinely seeks a comprehensive, just and lasting peace in Ukraine in line with the UN Charter. And I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the United Kingdom. Excellencies, we have heard the last speaker in explanation of vote before the vote. I wish to address the question concerning the majority required for the adoption of the draft resolution. In light of Article 18, paragraphs 2 and 3 of the Charter of the United Nations, is there any objection to taking action on draft resolution A/ES11/L7 by a 2/3 majority of the members present and voting? I see none. The 2/3 majority of members present and voting is therefore required for the adoption of the draft resolution A/ES11/L7. The 2/3 majority of members present and voting is therefore also required for the adoption of the draft amendments A/ES11/L8 and A/ES11/L9. Before proceeding to take a decision on draft resolution A/ES11/L7, in accordance with the Rule 90 of the Rules of Procedure, the Assembly shall first take a decision on draft amendments A/ES11/L8 and A/ES11/L9, one by one. We first turn to draft amendment A/ES11/L8. A recorded vote has been requested on draft amendment A/ES11/L8. We shall now begin the voting process. Those in favor of draft amendments A/ES11/L8, please signify. Those against or abstentions.
The General Assembly is now voting on draft amendment A/ES11/L8. L8. L8. Will all delegations confirm that the votes are accurately reflected on the screen? The voting has been completed. Please lock the machine.
The result of the vote is as follows. In favor, 11. Against, 94. Abstentions, 56. Draft amendment A/ES11/L8 is not adopted. We turn next to draft amendment A/ES11/L9. A recorded vote has been requested on draft amendment A/ES11/L9. We shall now begin the voting process. Those in favor of draft amendment A/ES11/L9, please signify. Those against or abstentions.
The General Assembly is now voting on draft amendment A/ES11/L9. L9. Will all delegations confirm that the votes are accurately reflected on the screen? The voting has been completed. Please lock the machine.
The result of the vote is as follows. In favor, 15. Against, 91. Abstentions, 52. Draft amendment A/ES11/L9 is not adopted. Since draft amendments A/ES11/L8 and A/ES11/L9 were not adopted, we shall proceed to take a decision on the draft resolution A/ES11/L7. The Assembly will now take a decision on draft resolution A/ES11/L7 entitled, I quote, Principles of the Charter of the United Nations underlining a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in Ukraine, end of quote. A recorded vote has been requested. We shall now begin the voting process. Those in favor of draft resolution A/ES11/L7, please signify. Those against or abstentions.
The General Assembly is now voting on draft resolution A/ES11/L7, entitled Principles of the Charter of the United Nations underlying a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in Ukraine. Will all delegations confirm that the votes are accurately reflected on the screen? The voting has been completed. Please lock the machine.
The result of the vote is as follows. In favor, 141. Against, 7. Abstentions, 32. Draft resolution A/ES11/L7 is adopted. Before giving the floor to explanation of vote after the vote, may I remind delegations that explanation of vote are limited to 10 minutes and shall be made by delegations from their seats. Now I offer the floor to the distinguished representative of Cuba.
Señor presidente, En virtud de su firme compromiso con la Carta de las Naciones Unidas y el derecho internacional, Cuba defiende la independencia, la soberanía e integridad territorial de los estados y la libre determinación de los pueblos. Nos oponemos sin ambages al uso o la amenaza del uso de la fuerza y apoyamos la solución pacífica de los conflictos. Hace casi un año advertimos ante esta Asamblea General que la historia exigiría responsabilidad al gobierno de los Estados Unidos por las consecuencias de una doctrina militar crecientemente ofensiva fuera de las fronteras de la OTAN que amenaza la paz, la seguridad y la estabilidad internacionales. Hoy en Ucrania, en lugar de disminuirse las tensiones, se exacerba la confrontación en el terreno mediante el flujo creciente de armas, la retórica agresiva y las sanciones unilaterales que contribuyen a extender el conflicto. Cuba se ha abstenido en la votación del proyecto de resolución L7 por considerar que el mismo no propicia ni contribuye al diálogo y la negociación con la participación de todas las partes involucradas para alcanzar una paz real y duradera. Lograr ese objetivo es la mayor urgencia ahora. No puede continuar atizándose un conflicto que todos los días ocasiona muertos y heridos y grandes daños materiales. Rechazamos cualquier intento de manipular en el futuro este texto como base legal para justificar la eventual creación de tribunales dirigidos a realizar enjuiciamientos en el plano nacional e internacional. La Asamblea General no tiene mandato para ello. Cuba continuará abogando sin descanso por una solución diplomática seria, constructiva y realista de la actual crisis en Ucrania por medios pacíficos y con irrestricto apego a las normas del derecho internacional, que garantice la seguridad y soberanía de todos, así como la paz y la seguridad regional e internacional. Muchas gracias.
I thank the distinguished representative of Cuba. Before giving the floor to the next speaker, may I kindly ask delegates to tone down their conversations. Let's pay respect to all speakers equally. Thank you very much for your understanding. Now I offer the floor to the distinguished representative of Egypt.
شكرا جزيلا سيد الرئيس، نشكرك على استعادة النظام في القاعة. سيد الرئيس لقد صوتت مصر لصالح القرار المعروض على الجمعية العامة في إطار التزامها الراسخ بمقاصد ومبادئ ميثاق الأمم المتحدة، خاصة التصفية السلمية للنزاعات الدولية واحترام السيادة والسلامة الإقليمية للدول الأعضاء، وهو ما ينعكس بثبات وبصورة متسقة على مواقف مصر الثابتة إزاء مختلف القرارات الدولية. وفي هذا الإطار تود مصر التأكيد على ما يلي: 1. تزامن التصويت اليوم مع مرور عام على اندلاع الأزمة الأوكرانية، والتي امتدت تبعاتها الإنسانية والاقتصادية لتطال الجميع وليس فقط الأطراف المتصارعة. فما زالت الدول النامية بالذات ومنها مصر تعاني بصورة مباشرة جراء استمرار هذه الأزمة التي تؤثر على اقتصاداتها بصورة حادة جراء التبعات السلبية على صعيد الأمن الغذائي وأمن الطاقة وعرقلة سلاسل الإمداد. ويستمر مع الأسف الشديد سيد الرئيس تراخي المجتمع الدولي في التعامل الجاد مع التحديات الاقتصادية والاجتماعية التي سببتها الأزمة للدول النامية، أو العمل سوياً لإيجاد حلول مناسبة لها. ولكل هذا تؤكد مصر مجدداً ضرورة العمل الفوري على تسوية الأزمة الأوكرانية في أقرب فرصة، وتعيد التذكير بالنداء الصادق الذي أطلقه السيد رئيس الجمهورية عبد الفتاح السيسي عند افتتاح مؤتمر تغير المناخ COP 27 بشرم الشيخ حول ضرورة وقف الحرب الأوكرانية وبحث سبل تسويتها بصورة فورية. سيد الرئيس، إن مصر كانت تأمل في أن يطرح القرار الذي تم اعتماده اليوم آليات لتسوية الأزمة وبدء مشاورات جادة وشاملة وغير مشروطة لتسويتها. وتحث مصر كافة الأطراف الدولية المعنية على البحث الحثيث عن الآلية المناسبة لاستئناف مفاوضات إنهاء النزاع بصورة سريعة، مع ضرورة مخاطبة جذور الأزمة ومسبباتها بصورة تكفل الاستجابة للشواغل الأمنية لكل أطراف الأزمة، وبما يضمن أمنها القومي بصورة متكافئة وعادلة ومستدامة. كما تحث مصر أيضاً كافة الأطراف المباشرة وغير المباشرة على الكف عن التصعيد أو اتخاذ أي تدابير من شأنها إطالة أمد الأزمة وتفاقمها، وذلك بهدف إيقاف نزيف المعاناة الإنسانية على الأرض في ميدان الصراع، بالإضافة إلى إنهاء آثار الأزمة إنسانياً التي طالت أبرياء في قارات تبعد آلاف الأميال عن الصراع. وأخيراً سيد الرئيس، تأمل مصر في أن تذكر الأزمة الراهنة الجميع على الساحة الدولية بضرورة الكف عن المعايير المزدوجة في التعامل مع حالات متطابقة وفقاً للقانون الدولي، وتؤكد أن الكيل بمكيالين لن يفضي في النهاية إلا إلى تآكل القانون الدولي وتهاوي منظومة الشرعية الدولية بأسرها. وشكراً سيد الرئيس.
أنا أشكر المندوب المحترم لمصر. And now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of South Sudan.
Mr. President, South Sudan takes the floor in explanation of vote after the vote. South Sudan voted in favor of the resolution just adopted. Since the inception of the conflict a year ago, South Sudan has maintained and continuously cast an abstain vote. As a country that emerged from the longest civil war in the continent, and is implementing a peace agreement which many of you in this chamber helped to deliver, we joined to vote in favor of the draft with the singular reason that this conflict needs to stop. Its devastation has been experienced far and widely. Therefore, through our vote, we strongly call for a peaceful and speedy settlement through a negotiated mechanism agreed upon by the parties to the conflict. It is our considered belief that there is no military solution to the conflict than the destruction we have witnessed. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of South Sudan. Now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Indonesia.
Mr. President, 1 year after the war began in Ukraine, we are no closer to peace. Death, suffering, and destruction continues to mount. The impact of the war has gone beyond the borders of the countries in conflict. Indonesia voted in favor for the resolution because we believe upholding the principle of the UN Charter and international law, including peaceful resolution of dispute, respect for human rights, and the rule of law, are fundamental to resolve the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Despite this, we deeply regret that critical elements which we constructively suggested in the drafting process are missing in the final draft. In this regard, we believe the resolution adopted today may not have achieved the intended goal, which is to help bring the countries at war closer to peace. The resolution is missing the spirit to realizing peace in Ukraine. Nor does the resolution call on the international community to create conditions conducive to ending the war. Most notably, the resolution is missing the call for the two parties in conflict to pursue dialogue, diplomatic means, and enter into direct peace negotiation. Ultimately, the two parties themselves are the ones that can and must prevent further downward spiral and end the war. We are also concerned that the resolution failed to avoid a zero-sum game approach to resolving the underlying problem. As such approach will only deepen the divide between the conflicting parties. Mr. President, the General Assembly is the most inclusive organ of the United Nations. Its resolution reflects the collective voice and statement of 193 members of the United Nations. It is therefore fundamental that its resolution be factually correct, accurate, inclusive, and balanced. GA resolutions are not social media content. The credibility of our august institution is put on the line if resolution put forward by the GA spins factual information. The resolution adopted today was leaning very close towards this direction. Mr. President, we must continue to work towards a world where aggression and violence have no place and where the principles of international law and human rights are respected. We must not apply double standards in addressing situations of conflicts in all parts of the world, whether that is the war in Ukraine, in Palestine, or any other part of the world. Indonesia stands ready to support all efforts towards peace and stability, and we call on the international community to do so. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Indonesia. Now I offer the floor to the distinguished representative of Lesotho.
Mr. President, Lesotho is taking the floor in explanation of position after the adoption of ESS Resolution A/ES/11L7 entitled UN Charter Principles Underlying a Comprehensive, Just, and Lasting Peace in Ukraine. We must always remember that we came together under the United Nations as peace-loving states, which accept the obligations contained in the UN Charter, and in the judgment of the organization, are able and willing to carry out these obligations. On everything we do, pursuance of international peace and stability should be our goal. Needless to mention that Article 2, subsection 3 enjoins all member states to settle their international disputes by peaceful means in such a manner that international peace and security and justice are not endangered. It is on this premise that Lesotho disassociates itself from preambular paragraph 7 and operative paragraph 5. The resolution clearly states the principles to be followed to achieve comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in Ukraine. However, the conflict in Ukraine shows no signs of abating. Lesotho firmly believes that respect for sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence are as enshrined in the United Nations Charter, are sacrosanct principles and should be respected and upheld by all member states at all times for the attainment of sustainable international peace. Therefore, Lesotho's vote was motivated by genuine desire for peace. The situation in Ukraine raises serious concerns with political, economic, and security ramifications for Europe and the rest of the world. The manner in which the resolution is framed further creates distance between warring parties and does not indicate any immediate steps for diplomatic solutions, as well as endeavors that would hasten a peaceful settlement of the conflict. Allow me to conclude, Mr. President, by reiterating that Lesotho would like to see the international community constructively supporting parties in their search for sustainable peace. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Lesotho. Now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of India.
Mr. President, India continues to remain concerned over the situation in Ukraine. The conflict has resulted in the loss of countless lives and misery, particularly for women, children, and the elderly, with millions becoming homeless and forced to seek shelter in neighboring countries. Reports of attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure are also deeply concerning. We have consistently advocated that no solution can ever be arrived at the cost of human lives. In this context, our Prime Minister's statement that this cannot be an era of war bears repetition. Escalation of hostilities and violence is in no one's interest. Instead, an urgent return to the path of dialogue and diplomacy is the way forward. Mr. President, India's approach to the Ukraine conflict will continue to be people-centric. We are providing both humanitarian assistance to Ukraine and economic support to some of our neighbors in the global south under economic distress, even as they stare at the escalating costs of food, of fuel, and fertilizers, which has been a consequential fallout of the ongoing conflict. Mr. President, the overall objective of today's resolution, seeking a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in line with the UN Charter, is understandable. We also note the emphasis on increasing support by member states for diplomatic efforts to achieve peace, as well as support for the Secretary General's efforts to promote a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in Ukraine. However, reports from the ground portray a complex scenario with the conflict intensifying on several fronts. Today, as the General Assembly marks a year of the Ukrainian conflict, it is important that we ask ourselves a few pertinent questions. Are we anywhere near a possible solution acceptable to both sides? Can any process that does not involve either of the two sides ever lead to a credible and meaningful solution? Has the UN system, and particularly its principal organ, the UN Security Council, based on a 1945 world construct, not been rendered ineffective to address contemporary challenges to global peace and security? Mr. President, India remains steadfastly committed to multilateralism and upholds the principles of the UN Charter. We will always call for dialogue and diplomacy as the only viable way out. While we take note of the stated objectives of today's resolution, given its inherent limitations in reaching our desired goal of securing lasting peace, we are constrained to abstain. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of India. Now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Pakistan has abstained on the draft resolution contained in document A/ES11/L7. I wish to explain the reasons for our vote. Pakistan is deeply concerned by the conflict in Ukraine, which has caused and is causing immense human suffering in Ukraine and massive damage to its infrastructure, economy, and society. We acknowledge the considerable effort made by the co-sponsors to moderate the tone and language of the draft resolution. Pakistan fully supports the resolution's call for respect for the principle of the sovereignty, sovereign equality, and territorial integrity of states, and non-acquisition of territory by the threat or use of force. States cannot be torn apart by the use of force. Pakistan regrets that these principles have not been universally applied and respected. For instance, in the situation of foreign occupation and the ongoing attempt at the illegal and forcible annexation of Jammu and Kashmir. Pakistan also endorses the resolution's call on member states and international organizations to redouble their support for diplomatic efforts to achieve a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in Ukraine. While the hostilities continue, there is an ever-present danger of a further military and geographical escalation of the war. There is thus an imminent threat to global peace and security. Mr. President, while my delegation agrees with and endorses the principles and general provisions contained in the draft resolution, there are some provisions which are not consistent with Pakistan's principled position on some of the elements covered in the resolution. As a country that has seen and suffered the consequences of prolonged conflict in our neighborhood, we attach highest priority to the immediate cessation of hostilities and the resumption of a dialogue to achieve a just and durable solution through direct or indirect negotiations, mediation, or other peaceful means. In this regard, we see an important role for the United Nations and the Secretary General, inter alia, under Chapter 6 and 8 of the UN Charter, for efforts aimed at de-escalation, renewed negotiations, and sustained dialogue for a peaceful diplomatic solution. Mr. President, consistent with our position on the draft resolution in document A/ES 11/L7, we have also abstained on the amendments proposed to the resolution by Belarus in documents A/ES 11/L8 and A/ES 11/L9. Mr. President, Pakistan continues to hope that in a constructive approach, the parties will soon accept a mutual and early cessation of hostilities. We also hope for the resumption of a dialogue for a durable resolution of the conflict based on the principles of the UN Charter and past agreements, and bearing in mind the legitimate security interests of all states. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Pakistan. Distinguished delegates, we have heard the last speaker in explanation vote after vote. In exercise of the right of reply has been requested. May I remind members that statements in the exercise of the right of reply are limited to 10 minutes for the first intervention and to 5 minutes for the second intervention, and should be made by delegations from their seats. I call on the representative of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. President, my delegation takes the floor to exercise the right of reply in response to the provocative statement made by South Korea yesterday. We categorically reject South Korea's outrageous outburst, which merits no comment. However, now that South Korea provoked us, let me make a few words. We reiterate that we have never recognized the unlawful UN Security Council sanctions resolution against the DPRK, which was cooked up by the United States and its vessel forces. We once again make clear that we have never had any arms dealings with Russia, and that we have no plan to do so in the future either. South Korea's reckless remark is intolerable, as it is totally aimed at trying to tarnish the image of the DPRK by fabricating a non-existent stuff. It is also a grave provocation that triggers counteraction. Clearly speaking, had the United States not infringed upon the just security interests of Russia and accelerated the eastward advance of NATO step by step, the present situation of Ukraine would not have been created. At present, the US and other Western countries are wrecking the global peace and the regional security while handing over military hardware to Ukraine to the value of an astronomical sum of money in total disregard of Russia's security concerns. We would like to draw the attention of the member states to the fact that in January, the NATO Secretary General flew to South Korea to put pressure on the latter for its passive military support to Ukraine. It is also an open secret that South Korea is seeking to supply ammunition and weaponry to Ukraine in the face of the mounting pressure from the United States. It is a matter of time that military hardware of South Korea will turn up in the battlefields in Ukraine. South Korea's allegation is aimed at distracting the attention of the international community from its criminal record. We have already made it clear that we will not deal with South Korea. South Korea should be well aware that if it continues to provoke us groundlessly, it will face extreme security crisis, far from diffusing its security uneasiness. Taking this opportunity, we stress that the bravest Russian people have the will and capability to defend the security and territorial integrity of the country without any outside military support. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I call on the representative of India.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I am taking the floor today to say that India chooses this time not to respond to Pakistan's mischievous provocations. Our advice to the delegate of Pakistan is to refer to our numerous rights of reply that we have exercised in the past. Pakistan has only to look at itself and its own track record as a state that harbors and provides safe havens to terrorists and does so with impunity. Such uncalled for provocation is particularly regrettable and certainly misplaced at a time when, after 2 days of intense discussions, we have all agreed that the path of peace can be the only path forward to resolve conflict and discord. I thank you.
Thank you. I call on the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President, for giving me the floor. In exercise of my right of reply, we would like to make the following points. India continues to perpetrate a factually incorrect position on this forum year after year. Jammu and Kashmir is an internationally recognized disputed territory and not an integral part of India, as it has been claimed. Repeating a wrong position would not make it acceptable at any point. The focus of today's debate is on people and on the crisis that we face at hand. And one of the inalienable rights of the people enshrined in the very first article of the Charter is the right of self-determination. In the case of Kashmiri people, the right to self-determination has been recognized and promised to them by the UN Security Council through its resolutions. For over 7 decades, India has prevented the Kashmiris, through force and fraud, from exercising this right and holding the UN-supervised plebiscite to enable the Kashmiris to determine their destiny. India has imprisoned the entire Kashmiri leadership, illegally detained thousands of Kashmiri youth, including women and children, summarily executed young boys, put down protests violently, and burnt down entire neighborhoods and villages. Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir remains the most militarized zone in the world, where close to 900,000 security forces have been deployed by India to curb the legitimate struggle of the Kashmiri people. But such measures only serve to intensify the struggle of the people of Jammu and Kashmir for the right to self-determination. Even in the face of worst atrocities as evident from thousands of unknown, unmarked mass graves in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, the innocent people of Jammu and Kashmir remain firm in their claim for their right to self-determination. Pakistan will keep exposing Indian brutalities and inform the international community of the plight of the Kashmiri people. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I call on the representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. President. My delegation applied for a right of reply to make a few comments about DPRK's remarks. Let me be short but very clear. We believe each statement distracts the very reason why all of us are here together. It is about our desire for international peace and stability. It is about our respect for justice and international law. And it is about our commitment to the core principles and values of the United Nations Charter. My delegation believes all the representatives here know who is violating its duties under the UN Charter and international law. Needless to say, it is DPRK. We also would like to reaffirm that any arms trade with the DPRK constitutes a blatant violation of the UN Security Council resolutions. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I call on the representative of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea for the second intervention.
Thank you, Mr. President, for giving me the floor again. My delegation is compelled to take the floor to exercise the second of the right of reply in response to the statement by South Korea. We are not going to reiterate our position, but we take these opportunities to strongly condemn South Korea's attempt to incite a fratricidal confrontation in this August forum. And we condemn in the strongest terms that the Security Council is being transformed into a tool for implementing the hostile policy of the United States and South Korea and other vassal forces without mentioning a single word about the United States and South Korea joint military exercises now taking place in and around the Korean Peninsula, which seriously encroach upon the security interests of the DPRK. We seriously warn South Korea that if it continues to come up with baseless accusations in hot pursuit of its hostile policy against the DPRK, it will inevitably face greater security disaster. South Korea must bear in mind that continued submission to the United States will lead to its self-destruction. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. In accordance with the terms of paragraph 11 of the resolution just adopted, the 11th emergency special session of the General Assembly is temporarily adjourned. This meeting is adjourned.